because we're leaving one app and going to another, we always get an iOS leave whatever app you're leaving, just say open. And this will send all the data into ForeFlight. Now, there's a couple of things that are going on here that go way beyond the obvious. So the first thing I want to do is just zoom in on the root. Are you familiar with crossing limitations? So this would be the second fix in the root editor at the top, the Jupy fix. Crossing limitations between parentheses, 489 knots, flight level full 10. And you can see I've zoomed in on the screen to show you what that flag looks like. You familiar with seeing these?
In the flight plan portion up at the top, but that's almost like the crossing restrictions in a SID or a
That's
star.
exactly right.
Yeah.
So when we pick all that stuff up out of your flight plan, we build that into ForeFlight for you because it's great situational awareness. Just want to point that out. You'll notice in the upper left-hand corner in the screen, there's a little left arrow and it says Gmail. That's a quick way to get back to the email application. So I'm just going to tap that and I'm going to drop down the first attachment. Now I'm going to get the second one, the content pack. So when you tap on the content pack, you get this little zip icon. You always get something that says preview content. Again, don't touch that. What we're looking for in this case in the upper right-hand corner is the square box with the up arrow, which is the iOS icon for send to or share with. So I'm going to tap that, and iOS brings up a list of all the apps, I'll scroll them left and right, that can receive a zip file. Just tap ForeFlight. Now, this is not actually in the user guide because we haven't updated it yet, but with the new versions of ForeFlight detects that you're importing a zip file. It sees that it's a content pack, tap content pack, the actual word to confirm it, and then that loads it, and then you can see it's installed. Just say okay. That's it. So if you can do these 5 presses, you're now an expert in PlotNG because that's the end of data entry for PlotNG. Everything here moving forward is going to be how do you use ForeFlight. Before we get into this process, what I'd like to do is take you through 5 settings in ForeFlight that we find particularly useful for international flying. So if you happen to have your iPad, open it up, bring it to the map screen on ForeFlight. Let me know when you're ready, and I'm going to take you through those settings.
It is there.
Great. Top row, third icon from the left is the gear icon, which is the settings for the map screen. So tap that to bring up the pop-up and scroll that list all the way to the bottom. Looking at the bottommost slider, I'm toggling it on the screen, is called multiple selections. Do you know what that is?
I have been in the past, but I don't remember right now.
Let me go through it again real quick. I'm going to turn it off to demonstrate this. So if I were to bring up the layer menu and I wanted to show, let's say, the clouds and temperature, because they're in 2 total sections or 2 different sections separated by the little faint horizontal lines, I can have both those on at the same time. Now, when I tap clouds, notice that I get the clouds on the screen, but the menu pops back up. I have to literally drop it down again to get temperature. Well, that's a multi-step process. But the purpose of multiple selections is it allows me, when I turn it on, to select multiple layers without this menu bar popping up and down. So I can turn off temperature and clouds and then tap anywhere on the screen. So this is a user interface convenience tool. Pretty simple, but effective. The second option can also be found by scrolling the settings all the way to the bottom. And we're looking for the 6th option up, which says mark positions, which I'm turning on and off. And I think you said you've already played with this, so you should be familiar at least cursorily with mark positions.
Yes.
So you know that on the left edge of the screen, the magenta line is going through the icon that looks like an upside down teardrop, and that is the tool that you use to drop a mark position. Yes. We're on the same page?
Yep.
Fantastic. The last 3 options can be found in the lower right-hand corner of the settings. So tap More, lower right-hand corner, and then tap Settings in the upper right-hand corner. So as you're probably well aware, ForeFlight has a bajillion options. Right underneath the close button at the upper left-hand corner is the search box that says Filter. Type in the word Time, T-I-M-E, and it will filter out all the options related to time. Choose the bottom one that says Unit/Time. Now, if you haven't played with the screen before, this is basically the area in which you can customize the way ForeFlight displays information to you. So if you were in Europe, you might want to have your units in kilometers per hour or meters instead of feet for visibility, whatever it is. There's two settings on here that are really important. So the first one is the top setting that says times. And if you tap on it, this allows you to tell ForeFlight when displaying a time on the screen using the local station or Zulu. If you've never played with this, it could be set to local, but choose Zulu. So forget about the fact that all of our weather reports are in Zulu, the fact that you're crossing multiple time zones every hour. The real issue here is when you are doing a 10-minute check, you are to precisely mark your position on your plotting chart and then add the time in Zulu. By setting Zulu here, we're telling ForeFlight to do all the dirty work for us, so we don't have to do anything for those 10-minute checks. If you've done that, hit the back arrow once, and now choose the sixth option down, which is coordinates. And this one trips up a lot of flight crews, so if you've missed this, don't beat yourself up. You know that in ForeFlight, if you were entering a route in the route editor, you can put in like a 5-letter waypoint fix, you can put in a 3-letter VOR, etc. But you can also put in a latitude or longitude using one of the 6 error formats. And ForeFlight will maintain the way in which you put that in, depending on the format you choose, so it looks familiar to you and it matches your flight plan. However, when ForeFlight displays a latitude or longitude, it's going to use one of these 7 different formats with which to display the information. The top 3 options are the most common for U.S. operators, and options 2 and 3 are by far the most common. So option 2 is degrees, minutes, hundredths of minutes, where the last 2 digits go from 0 to 99. Option 3 is degrees, minutes, seconds, where the last 2 digits go from 0 to 59. Now, this is really super important. I'm sure you probably know exactly where I'm going with this, but imagine you're at a half-degree waypoint over the ocean. Option 2 would be the last 2 digits would say 50, but for option 3 would be 30. You're exactly the same location. You're exactly where you're supposed to be, but it turns out if you compare the display in ForeFlight to the display that is your present position on your non-steering FMS, they may not agree. As part of a checklist SOP, we always recommend that when you get into a different airplane, confirm that the displayed latitude and longitude in ForeFlight matches the display format of your FMS. Now, if you're flying a Challenger, I'm thinking it's option 2, which is degrees, minutes, hundredths of minutes.
I believe so.
Okay, but that's a critical oversight that can cause you a little bit of head scratching for the wrong reason at the wrong time. Any questions on this?
No.
Okay, hit the back arrow twice, and in the filter box, let's type in the word track, T-R-A-C-K. Now, as it happens, the displays, the options that we're looking for are right here on the screen in the second section called track log. Enable start-stop control, which I'm toggling, and enable auto start-stop. So are you familiar with track logs, which are different than breadcrumbs?
No. Well,
okay.
I don't know which one I've used.
Okay, that's fine. So we need to turn on track.
They kind of have the same, they kind of, in my mind, they kind of mean the same thing, so I'm not exactly sure what the difference is.
Well, let me explain it to you, because they sort of do mean the same thing, but they operate very differently and they have very different consequences. So when you turn this feature on, track logs will cause ForeFlight to record every second your current position, your latitude and longitude, your ground speed, your magnetic course, and your altitude. So it is giving you, if you will, a little spreadsheet at the end of the flight, which shows you every second exactly where the plane was, not what you plan to do. This is not only useful for potential 6-month inquiries after the flight, but as it happens, it is a companion feature in ForeFlight to the marked positions. So how can these two things actually be related? When you drop the marked positions, you're accustomed to seeing the upside-down green teardrop appear on the screen, and that's great. But if you're not familiar with the nuance of it, what you may have noticed is 15 minutes after ForeFlight detects that the airplane has landed, it erases all of those marked positions off the screen. Well, that's both good and bad. It's good because I don't have to clean up after myself. It's bad because I need those marked positions for 6 months. That's my key data.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we get ForeFlight to store the marked positions? As it turns out, that's where track logs come in. By turning on this feature, when you drop a marked position, it will store it in the currently running track log. So that becomes, if you will, the plastic container that's going to hold my push pins, the marked positions, as I drop them. Make sense?
Kinda. In,
Well, we're going to
in,
all this work.
in theory, it makes sense. Yes.
Okay, well, I'm going to demonstrate it for you
then
in
once
real
we
time.
see it in
Okay.
action, it'll make more sense.
Okay, so the first option, which I'd like you to turn on, and I'm toggling it, enable start stop control, simply puts an icon on the screen right underneath the marked position. So not only can you monitor that the track log is working correctly because it changes color when it's running, but it also allows you to have manual control should you ever need it. The second option right beneath it, which I'm toggling, is enable auto start stop, and that's a really cool feature. Such that when ForeFlight detects that your airplane is moving, it turns on the track log feature, and when it detects that you stop moving, it turns it off. So you don't have to worry about dealing with this thing when you've just gotten your clearance to line up and wait. The algorithm for determining whether or not the airplane is flying is rather complicated, but in the back of your mind, just keep the simple idea of, I'm moving faster than 40 knots, I'm higher than 500 feet AGL, I'm in motion. Converse is true, it stops it. Make sense?
Yep.
At least for that part?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so those are the 5 features that we're really interested in. And I think it's a good idea to get started with how do you use PlotNG? So the way you described it, if I'm not mistaken, you're a two crew member in the cockpit. You're the only one that's really using this technique, so this data is really being stored for you, not for a whole flight department of like 30 pilots, correct?
Right.
Okay. I'm going to show you then an extremely simple way of saving your data within ForeFlight, so you don't have to worry about data management. But I would like to simply interject that we support any online storage using iOS's Files app or email or any other method that's supported on iOS. We support it all. If you can do it on the iOS device, it works with us. For today, I'm going to show you how you can save all of this information within ForeFlight directly. So the first thing that I want to do is go back and just review that we loaded in our route and we loaded in our content pack. Forget about the fact that we just did a quick demo. The very first thing you want to do is simply tap the Send To button. Look on the bottom of the route editor. On the left side, there's 4 icons. The fourth one on the right is this square box with the up arrow. That's the Send To or Share With icon. So this is icon appearing in multiple locations from the ForeFlight. This is how you get data in and out of ForeFlight in the various components of it. And what I want to do is I want to send the route that I just loaded from my email to flights. That's the top left icon. And when I do this, it's going to create a flight as opposed to starting in flights and then building the route up there. So do you use ForeFlight when you fly domestically?
Yes.
And do you actually use the flight section of ForeFlight or not?
Yes.
Okay, so you're probably familiar with then going to flights, creating a new flight with the plus, and then building up your route and doing your balanced field length calculations, your runway length calculations, all that other stuff, weight and balance, and then you send it to the map screen. Is that correct?
Correct.
So we're doing just the opposite because we're getting the raw data from PlotNG. Now, you are more than welcome to scroll down the right column and do all the things that you normally do. We're just preloading the route. But the reason why we're doing this is you'll notice that in the left column, the topmost route is in reverse blue. That's the current one. To the right of it are the 4 colored icons. And I'm interested in the third one. That's a black icon with the white paperclip, and it says 0 files. Are you familiar with the files in ForeFlight?
Yes.
Okay, so you know that you can store all sorts of goodies that are associated with that flight. And this is where we're going to build our, if you will, manila folder of our journey log. So it's going to contain flight plan data, ETPs, all the good stuff that you would normally have. The only thing that we don't bring in for you from ForeFlight, obviously, are any LOAs that you may need to carry with you to present in the event that you have a SAFA check. Cool?
Yep.
So we've got nothing in here yet, and that's fine. I just wanted to create the holding bin or new manila folder for what we're going to be doing. So let's go back to the map screen, and everything in PlotNG can be done from the map screen. So I'm going to take you through the individual layers here. Of course, you now know that if you scroll up the right column, PlotNG layers appear at the bottom, and those layers are custom built based on the data that we find in the PDF flight plan that you sent to us. PlotNG layers always begin with a diamond as the first layer entry, which are the departure to the arrival airport. Now, if you tap on this particular layer, you'll notice on the screen that there is a light gray line that connects the departure and arrival airports, and that is the Great Circle route. We put that in there mainly as a curiosity so that you can see how efficient the flight planning was. And when I say efficient, it's just obviously the Great Circle route is the shortest, but there are many reasons why you can't fly one, not the least of which are airspace restrictions or weather. So this just gives you some idea of where you're at. The real reason for the layer, besides providing a demarcation line in the menu, is you'll notice at the departure airport, there is a label right at the airport, in this case, uniform 9876. If PlotNG finds the recall number in your flight plan, we'll put it right on the map screen so you can find it easily instead of having to rifle through the PDF. Use it, don't use it, it's up to you. I'm going to be using that phrase quite a bit through this demo because a lot of the features in PlotNG are convenience tools that are not actually required for AC 9170 Charlie or ICAO Quad 4. The second layer is the contingency layer. And if you haven't played with this, we basically drop a rather large conspicuous bullseye right near the oceanic portion of your trip. Now, there's one rule,
Now,
only one rule.
How did you
Sorry?
get there? How did you get there?
Sure. So this is the second layer. You see it's in blue, it says contingency.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, so all you're doing is turning on the accessibility of this bullseye. And the rule is if you see a bullseye on a PlotNG layer, it doesn't matter how big, that is the diameter of the bullseye appears on the screen, or what color we fill it in with, tapping the bullseye, not the label, will bring up additional information. So when I tap this, we get a pop-up in ForeFlight, and you can hit more details. And we include, with every trip kit, the current in-flight contingency rules when you're in oceanic airspace. And you can scroll through it to refresh your memory. Do I turn right? Do I turn left? Do I climb 500 feet? Do I descend 500 feet? How do I cross the tracks? The whole shebang is right here. So, you probably have this buried within your QRH. God forbid you should have some type of a contingency, but it's right here within ForeFlight, just at a two-tap press if you want it. It's up to you. Use it, don't use it. It's up to you. So the next thing that I want to talk about are the G&E layers. So this is gross navigation error, 10 minutes and 5 minutes. 10 minutes corresponds to a 2-degree check. There are some flight departments that actually do things with 5-minute checks. So you can turn both on, you can turn one on, you can turn neither on. The point is that these G&E checks are strictly advisory only. Now you'll notice that they're individually labeled. They start with alpha and they go all the way up to whatever they go up to. The reason for putting these here is because PlotNG analyzes your route and figures out which one of the fixes are oceanic, and then for the leg that fix is pertinent to, whether or not the leg is long enough to support a 10-minute check. So I'm going to zoom in just on Delta for a moment, and I'm going to bring up my measuring tool in ForeFlight, and you can see it actually says it's 10 minutes. So the question is how do it know? Well, I'd like to direct your attention up to the route editor. And you will notice that after the arrival airport EGSS Stansted, there is another pill that says 459 knots, and you're probably wondering what the heck that is. So when you file and calculate your routes and your flight plans, you're probably filing in terms of Mach airspeed. So for your airplane, what is it, like about Mach 0.85?
8.2.
8.2? Okay, I was in the right ballpark.
Yeah.
It turns out you can't put Mach speed in the route editor in ForeFlight. It only accepts knots in kilometers per hour. So this is one of those silent benefits that PlotNG provides, which is we pick up the data out of your flight plan, and regardless of what units it is, we do all the necessary conversions to bring it into ForeFlight to set up the environment for you. And if you look to the left edge of the route editor, you'll notice that we pre-populated the cruise speed, in this case 459 knots, and your cruising altitude, flight level 410. Now, the reason for doing this is because when you're on the ground, you could load this up and you can play whatever what-if games you like with ForeFlight, and you'll get very accurate fuel burns and distances and times and all that other good stuff. Of course, once your airplane starts moving, all bets are off. ForeFlight's going to use the real-time telemetry to do all the internal calculations. So this is really a pre-flight tool that we preload to set up your environment. But by setting this up, you can now see that when I take a measurement from the fix to the 10-minute check, it really is 10 minutes, and that's how that whole thing comes about. Now, these yellow markers don't do anything other than give you a visual indication of if your airplane symbol is moving across the route and you see it coming up to that point, and oh my God, I forgot to start my timer. No big deal. Simply do the 10-minute check. It doesn't have to be done exactly at 2 minutes. They just want to make sure that once you're established on the new leg segment, that you don't have a deviation that can get anybody into trouble. Now I'm going to turn on the simulator. Hold on one second. Okay. I'd like you to take a look at the left edge of the screen, and you'll notice that underneath the upside-down teardrop, you've got the REC button and a flight timer that's counting up. The REC button is blue. That is the track log feature. When it's blue, it's running. When it's black, it's not. And it's running also when the flight timer is counting up. So now, ForeFlight is taking a snapshot every second of your current position, your altitude, your ground speed, and your magnetic course. And here's the airplane that I put on course coming up to the second check mark. Now, I'm going to tell it to fly this leg so you can see the colors exactly as they would appear when you're actually flying. So we passed 49 North, 50 West, and we're coming up on the second G&E checkpoint. We're in agreement on this?
Yep.
Great. You're going to love this. Now, you said in your airplane, you connect your iPad to your ship Wi-Fi, and you're getting the airplane symbol, which means you're getting certified data coming into ForeFlight. This is going to make your life immeasurably simple. To do the 10-minute check, I simply hit the mark position, upside-down teardrop, and you'll notice that you get the pop-up on the screen. Now, I don't know if anybody's really gone into depth with you about what's going on the screen, but I think it's important to take a few moments out and tell you what you're seeing. You'll notice that the cursor is in the enter node box. That's where it always starts because that's probably some data that you might want to fill in. Now, some flight crews, you can leave a blank, you can add anything you want. ForeFlight doesn't do anything internally with it other than store what you type in. So it could be an ATS frequency, it could be part of a reroute clearance, it could be what you want for lunch, it could be, hey, check this circuit breaker after we land, it's been popping repeatedly. Clearly, you'd be putting that data on a totally separate sheet, but you could enter it here. The three fields above it, location, altitude, and speed, are in blue, and the blue indicates that that field is editable. So if I were to just tap on the altitude, you see I'm now able to override that data. Now the question is why would you want to do that? And the answer is, if you were not getting certified data into your iPad, that is, you were using a portable GPS device like a Bad Elf or a Stratus that's sitting on your glare shield, you then have the additional onus of bringing up present position on your non-steering FMS and comparing what you see here for your latitude, longitude, altitude, and speed against your PFD, MFD, and your non-steering FMS. And if any of them are off, you need to update ForeFlight. Now, 999 times out of 1,000 times, that portable GPS device is probably going to be more accurate than your FMS. But that's what is required for documentary purposes should a SAFA check arise or should the FAA want to review any of your flight data. In your case, you don't have to do anything with it because the data is certified. It came from your non-steering FMS. So that means there's only one data field that you may or may not want to play with. And that is, let me zoom in on the marked position. You'll notice that because we set the time in Zulu, we precisely marked our position and added the time in Zulu. That is an official 9170 compliant 10-minute check. All I have to do is hit save in the upper right-hand corner. But you know what they say on the commercials? But wait, there's more. I'm going to tap in the very first field that says name. To the right of it says optional. And notice that when I tap in there, optional goes away. Now, whatever appears in this name box will replace the label that's on the screen. So because I have to have the time in Zulu, I'll just replicate the, I don't know why I did that, the 1345 Zulu. And now I can type whatever it is that I want after it. So at this point, I may say, hey, I've got 24,000 pounds of fuel, and I happen to be 150 pounds ahead. So in this case, you'll notice that I get a really nice label right on the screen of what my fuel burn is. This is a pro pilot tip. You don't have to do it. But this is sort of what you're expecting to see in ARINC Direct, except you get to do it here yourself. Is this a good thing or a bad thing compared to your previous experience? Well, the good thing is in ARINC Direct, it fills all that data in automatically, except as I understand it, ARINC still doesn't connect to the GPS. The bad news is that you have to do it manually if you want it. By doing it this way, you're basically getting the data on the screen. If you zoom out, you get to see real quickly what your trend is, and it doesn't really mess up the whole screen. You're welcome, if you happen to have an iPad pencil or something equivalent, to scribble the information right on the map. It gets a little cluttered, gets a little dirty, but you can certainly do that if you want to as well. You don't even have to use this feature. You just want to keep it clean. Just say mark position and time, and you're finished. Once you're done dropping that marked position and setting it up, we recommend that you zoom in to one fix on either side of the marked position and take a screenshot. This is not a regulatory thing to do. This has to do with the SAFA checks. So if you're familiar with the checklist, item 16 has 3 elements that allow an inspector to look at any aspect of your journey log, your nav log, your plotting charts. While it is infrequent that they do this, one of the things that does come up, which is common, is, so we know that you're coming into France, and while you were over the North Atlantic, France changed the oceanic entry waypoint. Prove to us that you actually flew over the correct waypoint, not the old one from your flight plan. By having the screenshot, you can bring it up on the screen, show it to the inspector, you can email it, which is considered a legal document, and you are done with the inquiry in 5 seconds so that you can move on to the more important things. That said, by not showing the whole route, you have eliminated the fact that you could be introducing other information about questions that you don't want to be talking about at that point. So this is why we always recommend just show the minimum data for each one of the fixes, save a record of it. It may save your bacon and cut out some of the SAFA check if you get to that point. Any questions on that?
Nope. That's kind of what I had. In using ARINC's electronic plotting chart, I noticed that they, in the report, the final report, it has just what you were talking about, the little tiny screenshots, and it has little tiny icons included in the report. And so that's when I had started using yours, I did the same thing.
Right, so that's what the rationale is. It's really that simple. So you're right on the right target.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to turn off the track log for the moment. And what I'm going to do now is go down to the NAT tracks. And I think it's important to first say, you'll notice that there's 2 NAT track layers, NAT 139 and 140 in this example. The reason why there's 2 is because, which is not infrequent, when the tracks are published, there could be the current tracks and then also the future tracks. The future tracks, in this case, we always add a plus sign to show you that it's a time window that occurs after your departure. If there is no plus, there could very well be 2 track systems that you're right near a crossover, but they'll both be active for your departure time. And that's why we don't include the plus. So the plus is just giving you some indication about, is this really in the future or is this just a concurrently running thing? Why do we split it up? We do that so that you can declutter the screen. That's all that's about. There's nothing magical about it above and beyond that. So the question is, well, why do we only have the NAT tracks and we don't have the other tracks? So let me give you a 30-second history lesson on what's going on here. When we first came out about 4 or 5 years ago, at that time, ForeFlight did not have the ability to allow a user to show their tracks and a Jeppesen Oceanic chart at the same time. It was one or the other. So we decided to solve that problem, and we included worldwide tracks. We had the NAT tracks, Pacific tracks, and the Australian tracks. Pandemic comes along. Australia stops producing their track systems. We don't believe they're going to continue using tracks moving forward, so that's off the table. As it happens, even though the Pacific tracks are currently being updated in a state of transition right now as we speak to make them more in line with internally how the NAT tracks work, Pacific tracks are fundamentally routes which have procedures associated with them, but the NAT tracks are fundamentally procedures that have routes associated with them. And because there's about 10 times more ways of getting in trouble over the North Atlantic, we're including our tracks only for the North Atlantic, although, and I can't stress this enough, Use whichever tracks you like the best. Use 4Flights, use ours. We don't care. Just use one of them. So that begs the question then, if you can use the 4Flight tracks, why bother including the NAT at all? Let me show you a couple of things that we do a little different, and then we'll get down to where the rubber hits the tarmac. You'll notice that instead of using 4Flight's beautiful icons with the arrows and the track letter, we actually put a label on there. And the reason why we put in a label is because we think it's important to have the TMI number right on the screen. Even if you're flying a random route above the tracks, it's not uncommon for ATS to say, 123 Alpha Bravo, refresh us with your current position, and by the way, which track are you closest to? You can immediately look at this and say, 139 Charlotte. Great, no problem. You'll also notice that if you take a look at the purple tracks, let me blow this up a little more, the top 5 tracks are a darker purple than the bottom 3, which are a lighter purple. You'll notice in the nomenclature on the tracks, there's a plus sign after the track letter telling you it's a future track. But for those tracks which are darker, you'll notice that there's an asterisk in front of the TMI number. This is all very subtle, but the color should be the current thing that draws your attention. Any guesses as to why some tracks are darker than the other ones, since you've already read the manual?
No.
Putting you on the spot. Okay.
Can you hold right there for a second?
Sure. Okay. So
light and dark.
The dark tracks have PBCS layers. And the reason why we do this is because should you have a contingency that requires a descent, such as a depressurization or an engine out scenario, this is a quick situational awareness tool to let you know that your TCAS is about to light up like a Christmas tree because PBCS layers have a higher density of traffic. Now, if you recall, I told you in the beginning, by tapping on a bullseye, you can get more information. So these purple circles are bullseyes. I'm going to tap on this and hit more details. This is what our track message looks like. The remarks are basically reformatted to look better. Above it, we break out the flight levels from the remarks section. You'll notice that the flight levels that have PBCS layers have an asterisk after them. So in this case, it's 390 to 350. Above it, we have the route in blue. We break it out because we don't put the route fixed names on the tracks simply to keep the screen decluttered. If you want to see that on the screen, have at it. Use 4Flight tracks. It doesn't matter. Now, this is an older track message. So let me show you 4Flight's tracks just to compare them. Notice that they use an arrow with the letter. Notice that they have the track fixed waypoint names on there, but they don't have the TMI numbers. So those are just some simple differences. Doesn't matter to us which one you use, but here's the actual reason that we include these tracks.
And you turned that you turned that on and off in the layers section?
Yes, so 4Flight tracks can be turned on with the aeronautical layer, top left corner.
Oh, okay.
See, I'm tapping aeronautical?
Yeah, I got you now.
Okay.
I've never used 4Flight for crossing the ocean until this the time that I used your product. That was the first time, because like I said, everything else has always been, the previous company I was with, we were always going to the South Pacific. And
no problem.
And that's when we were using AirInc.
No problem. So 4Flight's tracks are temporal in nature. What does that mean? If you happen to be in Wi-Fi contact with the mother ship as you're flying, 4Flight will update your screen with the latest track messages as soon as they come out. And that's great because you always want to have the latest data in 4Flight. Our tracks are static. They appear in the trip kit, so they don't change. Why do we include them? Watch this. Let's pretend that 3 months after you get back from your trip, you get a letter in the mail from one of the ICAO member states, and they say, hey, 123 Alpha Bravo, 3 months ago you took a trip over the North Atlantic. We think you had a pilot deviation. Prove to us that you didn't. All you have to do is go back to the trip kit and load it back in, the same one that we sent you for that trip, and you will have the tracks exactly as they appeared on that day's flight. And I can simply, measuring tool, bring it up on the screen, take a screenshot, ship it to them, and I'm done with the inquiry. And if you want to get really precise, you could do it if you had to. Our information that we include in the trip kit is really a matter of protecting you during that 6-month window. less so about using it in flight. You're certainly welcome to use our tracks in flight. You can also use ForeFlights. It makes no difference. Either way, you've got tools at the end of the flight after it's over to help you out should something come up. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay, great. So let's get to the reason.
One question though, that you said use the measuring tool. You're using it to show that you were not close to another track? Is that what you're measuring? So
there's several ways I can do this. One way is I could use the track log, which has the precise latitude and longitude. The second way is I can simply take the measuring tool and just measure where my flight path was, right? Bring it up with breadcrumbs, for example, and show what the distance is from the track. There's a number of ways of doing this quickly without having to get into the analytical computation of where my airplane actually was.
Okay. Now,
and usually that will suffice.
Okay. Now, real quickly, this is sidebar. Explain the breadcrumbs.
Okay, so
the difference between the breadcrumbs and the track log. The track log I've been using before.
Let me show you the track log first. Here's the track log of what we did. So we actually flew from New Jersey over to this point in space when I turned the track logs off. And there's the marked position that you can see on the screen. So this is where it's stored.
Yeah.
This is not information that appears on the map screen, but it's data that's ForeFlight's holding for you. So that's what the track log is. If I go back to the map screen, let's see if I can turn on breadcrumbs from here. Right here. See on the middle of the screen, I'm turning on breadcrumbs?
Yes.
And when I turn it on, breadcrumbs will literally drop a green dashed line to show where the airplane is going on the map screen. So I can see how close I am to the route. The reason why we do not recommend using breadcrumbs ever is because let's say you've got a one leg that cuts into a second leg, and it's not just a 5 or 10 degree heading change. It could be like a 30 or 40 degree heading change. You're going to have, because it's going to be a fly by waypoint as opposed to a fly over waypoint, there's going to be turn anticipation. And you could be, I don't know, maybe a mile or two off the track from that turn anticipation to intercept the new leg. You never really want to show anybody what the track was, especially an inspector that doesn't know what they're looking at, because you don't usually intercept the leg. There's usually a little bit of overshoot and undershoot, and you kind of oscillate back onto the track. For that reason, we recommend staying away from breadcrumbs.
Okay, so the I'm still not clear on, okay, the track log, isn't that showing?
Okay, hold on one
it
second.
sounds like it's the same thing.
Let me turn on the simulator and you can see it. All right. So the airplane is moving now at 500 knots. Let me get the breadcrumbs on. They are on. Okay. So you can see now that the airplane's leaving a little tail behind it. So on the map screen, I'll just zoom this out. I'm on the map screen. You can actually see where the airplane has gone at any one point. The track log does not show you the information on the map screen. It is a separate record of what your flight actually did, and that's where it stores the marked positions. So breadcrumbs is for the map screen. You get to see where you are and where you've been. Track logs is what is the record of the entire flight plus hold the marked positions.
Okay, but they both show where you've been, though, right?
They will both show you where you've been, but you can't do any calculations, as far as I know, with the breadcrumb data, because there's no way to get the breadcrumb data out of ForeFlight.
Okay. Yeah, that was the confusing part, because you said you don't want to show anybody where you've been because of the oscillations, blah blah blah.
Well, but look, you can see the green line of where I've been. So if I were to have this thing going, the entire route, I'll actually show where the airplane was over the world as opposed to what my flight plan is in here. And the breadcrumb is going to deviate from the route segment for fly-by waypoints.
Okay. Yeah. So they're both showing where you've been. That was the confusing part when you said you don't want to show where you've been. So, but this is going to show. This is not going to be stored data.
That is correct.
Okay. That's the part of that I was missing there. Okay. Cool.
Okay. Let me turn off the simulator. Give me one moment. Okay, let's get this down. All right. So let's talk about the last feature, which is the reason that everybody uses PlotNG, which are ETPs. The way we handle this is you use Universal. We support like 11 different vendors that do trip planning support. Each one of them may have 300 or 400 different formats that they use, and you would not believe the way in which ETPs are scattered throughout the report. Sometimes they're grouped together, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're grouped by airport pair, sometimes they're grouped by contingency type. It's a mess. PlotNG reads all of this stuff. We pick out your ETPs, and then we group them according to first the airport pairs that they are associated with, and then we order them in the order in which they will appear along your route of flight. So no matter what vendor you use and what report format you have, you always see the same thing for flight exactly the same way. This is the reason why we have 3 different ETP groups in this particular example, ETP groups 1, 2, and 3. Your flight plan may only have 1 ETP group, may have none, it may have 6 or 7, depending on how long the route of flight is. Now, if you're in a 350, I doubt you're going to have more than 3, possibly 4. That's just because of the range of the aircraft. That said, you'll notice here that we break them out into separate ETPs, which gives you the ability to clutter and declutter the screen to your liking. There's no other reason for doing this. We also give you the airport pairs so that it gives you a finer grained control of how you want to display data on your screen. Now, there's 3 different ways that flight crews use this tool to their benefit. One way is some flight crews like to turn all of the ETPs on. They want to see everything at one shot. Some flight crews like to play hopscotch, where they turn on ETP group 1. When they pass those ETPs, they turn that off and then turn on ETP group 2, et cetera, down the line. And the third group of pilots that we work with like to use ADM for displaying their ETPs. So what do I mean by that? Let's say you're on this flight, you're coasting out, you pick up the weather in Gander, and it turns out that Gander's below minimums. Well, in this case, I cannot use ETP groups 1 or 2 anymore. I'll only turn on ETP group 3, which makes the most sense for the flight. So let's turn on the first ETP layer and let's see what we're doing by way of our graphics. Now, the first thing that should catch your eye are the 2 large orange circles. That is where your diversion airports are located. And we draw them that large so that if you were to go out to the world view, you still have great situational awareness to see where everything is. But if you were conversely zooming in and you have on ForeFlight's amazing aeronautical layer to tap on additional information, we're not going to encumber your ability to do that. So this is a static ring. It doesn't do anything other than just quickly identify for you where the diversion airport's located. Now you'll notice that the ETPs are actually the bullseyes along the leg segments. So in this case, there's 2 that's being shown. ETPs are color-coded. We use blue for depressurization, think blue in the face. We use red for medical, think Red Cross. We use green for the engine out scenarios, such as 1 engine out, 2 engine out, fan blade separation, ETOPS, whatever you may generate in your flight plan. And we also use black for PNR, PSR, if you happen to have that in there. So if you're looking at this thing, you're probably wondering to yourself, now wait a minute, the blue icon is associated with the blue label for depressurization, but why do I have a green icon associated with the red label for medical? For this demo, we jury-rigged the data so that the medical and the 1 engine out scenario are at exactly the same location in space. Now, this sometimes happens in flight plans. It's not that rare. And we did this to show you how ForeFlight will handle this. So you'll see 1 color icon for the bullseye and a different color icon for the label. And all you do is just zoom in, and you'll see that ForeFlight will bring the other label to the top. So this is a nice graphical way of handling 2 points at the same space and position. Again, because they're bullseyes, I can tap on it and bring up more data. The only thing that's really of any use here are the coordinates. So if you wanted to confirm looking at your flight plan that we actually plotted it correctly, have at it, knock yourself out. But there's really no useful data in that regard. Now we draw 1 vector through the group of ETPs to save clutter on the space. And the vector is drawn through the most fuel critical ETP, which 99.5% of the time is going to be your depressurization event. But on occasion, it's not. It's just the luck of the draw, depending on what the situation is. The arms of the vectors point in the magnetic course to the diversion airport, and instead of using arrowheads, we put a label up there, so if you're zoomed in, you can tell immediately which airport we're talking about for the diversion. But because there's also a bullseye, I'll just tap on the one for KEF. You'll notice that we get a pop-up with more details. And what we do here is aggregate the data from your flight plan so that you can quickly figure out what you have to do if you're doing a diversion. So in this case, let's just say you have a one engine out scenario. You flight plan to descend to flight level 350 with a true airspeed of 332 knots to get to KEF without having a wet footprint. So this is data from your flight plan, just reorganized, quickly, easy to get to. Use it, don't use it, it's entirely up to you. Any questions on that?
No. That I was not aware of, and I did not find that, but was a question of mine when we crossed.
Okay, great. So I learned just something new today.
Yeah, a really valuable piece.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is turn on all of the ETPs so you can see what it looks like. And frankly, this symbology, while it may be slightly different, this should be fairly familiar to you from your experience with ARINC Direct, because they're not that much different in the way that they represent their ETPs.
Right.
So one of the things I want to talk to you about now has to do with what happens if I have a reroute. And there's basically two different kind of reroutes the way we look at it. One reroute is you got something simple, like a coast in or a coast out point, and maybe a deviation in the middle of the route because of weather that you have to get a clearance for. In that case, our recommendation is always accept the CPDLC message in your FMS to update that, and then manually edit the route in the ForeFlight route editor, because it's incredibly quick. It's the easiest way of handling that for just 2, possibly 3 fixes. It is the other case where you might have an entire route change. If your luck is anything like mine, it's going to happen about 2.5 seconds right before you're ready to coast out. That's usually when they get you with the great news. Mm-hmm. So if that's the case, again, accept the CPDLC message and get yourself going in the right direction. But we always recommend, regardless, if at all possible, contact Universal, get a new flight plan sent up to your deck if you've got the Wi-Fi capability, because you always want to try to avoid the wet footprint scenario. And if the route changed enough, as you are well aware, you may not have current winds aloft information for that new route change, and that can dramatically change where your diversion airports are located and or whether or not you're going to have enough fuel to get to the diversion airport. You know, if it's just 10 miles off, but they had to change it by a track, for example, okay, so be it. What am I going to tell you? But let me give you an example of how PlotNG accommodates this if you can't or you don't want to contact Universal.
This is this is good information, because this scenario did happen to us. It was in the middle of the night and there was nobody around, so they just said, "Oh, from the coast out position," they said, "pretty much go direct." And it's like, okay, we're crossing all of these tracks. There's nobody out here. We're the only ones going this direction this time of night, and we crossed like 1, 2, 3, 3 different tracks. And it's like, okay.
Wow, you must have been flying in the Twilight Zone.
And
that's cool.
Yeah. And so I was wondering, I had wondered if the ETPs still applied, because it, of course,
yes, they do.
Our route did cross each one of the vertical lines.
No problem.
So
let me show you how it's done.
This is great.
So for the simple example, I'm just going to pick up this one fix on the screen. I'm just going to drag it up here, and I'll just choose 5730. It's the closest one. When I drag my route to the new route, you'll notice that the ETPs don't move. Why? Because they're part of the static content pack. It's pre-computed data that will not change. Yeah. So now you have to say to yourself, okay, well, where do the ETPs go? Well, we got you covered. So you'll notice underneath the ETPs, there will always be an additional layer called ETP reroute. And when you turn this on, this should look very familiar to you. We're giving you the graphical solution that you would have done on your plotting chart with a pencil and paper. Draw the great circle line between the 2 diversion airports, then a great circle 90-degree bisector right through the ETP. And where those lines cross your route, that's the wind-corrected solution of where the ETPs get relocated. And because they're color-coded, I can see that blue is depressurization, red is medical, and green is the one engine out scenario. There's nothing to do. Just turn on the layer and use your Mark II eyeballs. Okay.
Cool. For this, not being familiar with how yours worked, I have, and I wish I could share my screen, but we're talking, this Zoom call is on a PC, and I've got my tablet right next to me. but not understanding how it worked. I just turned on everything so I could see everything. And yes, it is very decluttered, very cluttered. But I wondered what those extra lines were for.
Now you know.
Because I mean, there's 18 different green lines, and it's like, okay, what applies to what?
Right. So this is the reason why you'll notice that the ETPs have a number associated with the type of ETP that it is. So you can see 31EO, 3DEP. So that if ETPs are close together, you can discriminate which ETP belongs to which ETP group from the menu.
Right. Okay, cool.
That's what that's all about. Okay. So
that's awesome.
That's PlotNG in a nutshell. We are not here to, quote unquote, build a journey log. We are not here to do all of the things that ARINC Direct does because we don't want to. We are here to do a plotting chart and nothing else.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, we've got all the tools here to let you do all those fanciful things. So before I go any further, the first question I want to ask you is, when you did your last flight using PlotNG, did you use a kneeboard and a pencil to do your master document editing, or did you edit it in ForeFlight or some other app? How'd you do it?
We both. The other captain was doing longhand, and I was doing the at each one of the what's it called, the upside down teardrop. The mark position. The mark positions, yeah. With each one of the mark positions, I would fill in the comments section, the time to the next waypoint, doing the altimeter number 1, altimeter number 2. I mean, those things.
Can I tell you another way to do it?
There was huge. I mean, they were highly populated in each one of those.
Okay, let me show you another way of handling this.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is just technique.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is go back to
I like that. I like that because I want to work smarter, not harder.
Exactly. I think I can speak for all of us when I say pilots are inherently lazy.
Yep.
So I showed you the email, which contains the trick kit that we sent to you. What I didn't show you was the email that you would have received from Universal. Now, obviously, there'd be text in there, "Dear Captain, here's your flight plan. Have a great day. Don't call us, we'll call you." But at the bottom of it is that PDF that contains all of the data, which can have your fuel reservations, EAPIS, could have passenger manifests, could have hotel reservations, could have NOTAMs, could have pictures of all your weather, but must contain at a minimum the master document, the raw ICAO flight plan, and your ETPs. PlotNG will just read only those 3 sections and ignore the rest, and that's how it builds its data. Let me tap on this PDF to bring this up. This is what we use to generate the demo graphics. Top section should be somewhat familiar to you. It may not look exactly the same as yours, but it should be somewhat familiar.
Yep.
We then have a short master document that begins with Jupi on the first page and ends with Gogo on the second page. Underneath it, that is the raw ICAO flight plan. Begins with a left parenthesis FPL. We need that, not the pretty form that looks like you filled it out by hand, even though it's computerized. That form does nobody any good. We need the raw data in the flight plan. And then, of course, here is the format that was just used for this example of the ETPs. Now, when I get this PDF, it could be anywhere from 2 to 60 pages, whatever it is. Look in the upper right-hand corner, square box with the up arrow. Remember the send to icon. So we tap this, we find ForeFlight, and let's send it into ForeFlight. Now, ForeFlight's going to recognize that you're trying to send it a PDF. And it's going to say, where do you want to put it? Do you want to put it in documents or flights? Now, you may be thinking to yourself, now, wait a minute. We created a brand new flight at the beginning of this demo. Maybe we should put it in that flight. That'd be the best place to store it. And the answer is no. Always choose documents. And I'm going to show you why in just a moment. So I'm going to tap on documents. It's now loading the PDF, and it brings it up on the screen. First thing I'd like you to do is look at the bottom edge of the screen. You'll notice that we're on the documents chapter in ForeFlight. So all I have to do is just scroll up. Look at the bottom edge of the screen with the icons, and documents is highlighted in white. Okay.
Yeah.
It's that simple. There's nothing magical here. I'm just pointing out that we're in documents now.
Okay, yeah.
You might need to scroll over to page 7, for example, which is the first page of your master document. So great. So you'll leave it on page 7. If I want to go back to the map screen, just tap Maps. I move around, I do something on it. Oh, I need to update my document? Great. Just tap on Documents to go back. If you loaded this into flights, You can't toggle back and forth. Every time you want to edit something, got to go to flights, got to select the PDF, got to go to the right page. I suggest you try this yourself to compare the two different ways of doing it, and you'll understand that this is clearly the simplest and most efficient way to edit your document. Now, what I'm about to show you, I'm doing strictly with my hand, my right finger, index finger, and my thumb. You do not need an iPad pencil for any of this. If you have one, great, it'll just make your life easier, but you don't need one. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch zoom, because it's always easy to work on something large. And what's one of the first tasks you have to do when you get into the cockpit? Simple. You got to verify your flight plan against your FMS. So, are you familiar with the editing tools for a PDF in ForeFlight?
No.
Look at the top edge of the screen. Leftmost icon says close. 3 icons to the right is a pencil. That's your editing tool. Okay. We're going to tap that, and we get a whole bunch of glorified Etch-a-Sketch type icons with which to do nice, simple things graphically on the page. And you should think of this as a $1,000 Etch-a-Sketch toy. It is not intelligent. It is not like ARINC Direct where it will track everything for you, which is great because then I can just quickly edit something that doesn't look right, completely out of order, and it doesn't mess up your document. It's bad, and this is where ARINC has an advantage, that if you're not paying attention to it, ARINC will keep you on the straight and narrow. ForeFlight assumes you're a pilot and you know what you're doing and stays out of the way. ARINC assumes that you're a pilot and you're an idiot and it knows better, so you've got to do everything its way. Here you use whatever SOPs you want. Let me start off with tapping the red square about the middle of the page. That is your pen choice. So you'll notice that I'm going to move the slider, and you can see on the screen the thickness of the line changes. I happen to personally like a 3-point line. You choose whatever you particularly prefer. You can choose any pen color. Red happens to show up really easily on the screen. But as a pro pilot tip, if you have multiple pilots sharing PNF duties, one pilot could use red, another one could use blue. Then at the end of the flight, you know who edited what. Just, simple little fun things to do to keep it interesting. What I need to do first is confirm that Joopy is in my FMS. So what I'm going to do is tap the third icon, which is the circle or ellipse. And when I confirm that Joopy is there, I can just put my finger northwest of the text, drag it down to the right, and there's my ellipse. Joopy's in the FMS. Now what I have to do is confirm the latitude and longitude. I'll tap the fourth icon, which from the left, which is a line segment, and just draw my line through it. Is that easy enough?
Yep.
Okay. If you want to do text, let's say I actually passed Joopy in flight, well, I can just simply tap the seventh icon, which is the T for text, tap on the screen where I want it, and I can put in, I got 11,650 pounds of fuel, hit done, drag it into place, and Bob's your uncle. Now, I have just electronically edited the document. If you want to do this with a kneeboard and a pencil, God bless you. At the end of the flight, take your iPad, use the camera to take a picture of the 2 or 3 pages that you edited. It's now electronic. But if you were to do it in ForeFlight, which is clearly a simple, easy way of doing business, periodically, you really do need to save your work. It's no different than if you're in Microsoft Word, you're typing a long report, and after a few pages you say, I ought to save an intermediate copy of this so that I don't blow the whole thing up if I make a typing mistake or I hit the delete all button. Do the same thing in ForeFlight. Notice in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, second box from the right, square box with the up arrow, the send to. So I'm going to tap that and I'm going to send it to flights. This is why we created the flight. Which flight do I want to store it in? It's always the first one. That's the newest one. So tap that and hit select flight plan. And I've now saved a copy in the folder that I created. So now I'm going to do a little bit more editing. And in this case, I'll just add a happy face. And I want to save this work as well. So I'll tap that, hit flights. Which flight? Always the first one. Select the flight plan. Now at the end of the flight, I'm going to have, let's go to flights here, and let's take a look. I've got those 2 PDFs, just to refresh your memory. On the black icon, which is the paperclip, it now says there's 2 files. There's the PDF that I saved. Bottom one is always the most current, so there's the top one without the happy face. Here's the bottom one with the happy face. So at the end of the flight, I don't need the top one anymore because I didn't blow away any of my data, and the last one's the current one. I can just slide it to the left and just remove it. It just cleans up after myself. But there is my master document. Now, what about all those screenshots? Top right corner, I can hit the plus sign and I can import from photos. That's where screenshots are saved. And I'm going to save the photo library. Now, I've got a bunch of pictures here, so I'm just going to scroll past it to some of the PlotNG pictures. And let's say I choose these 3 images from my flight. Those would be the 3 10-minute checks. Well, all I do is add it, and that's how I build up my journey log. Pardon me. Now, there's one last thing that I didn't tell you, and this is singularly the most important part of this whole conversation. At the end of the flight, you really should go and turn on all of the 4 flight layers that are pertinent. So GNE10, the NAT tracks, the ETPs. You don't need the contingency, and you certainly don't need the GNE5. That is your plotting chart. If you really want to get smart about it, turn on an underlying oceanic chart for reference as well. Zoom it in to just the oceanic segment and take a screenshot. That is legally the only picture you need. Everything else is to support you for a SAFA check. This is the thing you want to save for 6 months. And that should also be imported into your flights. And then this becomes the record of what you did in your flight. This data will automatically synchronize with your 4-flight account when you get into Wi-Fi range again when you land. And then sometime later in the week, you can go to your desktop computer and just download all the stuff and store it wherever you want. Simplest way to store the data for first-time users. If you get more advanced, you can store it in Dropbox, Amazon S3, Google Drive, Outlook, whatever you want to store it in, it's fine with us. If it runs on your iOS device, we support it. That is the demo. Any questions?
Yeah, I kind of had a question, but I'll have to go and look and see, because one of the questions I had after the flight was I was trying to clean up all my long list of flights, and I was
let's talk about that.
I wonder. I didn't delete anything off of my flights because I didn't know how to store it, and I didn't want to except for my screenshots. That's the only thing that I knew that was actually stored, so I just left those flights, and that's why I'm looking at them right now from last May.
Okay, let me interrupt you, and let me take you through a very important element right now, because a lot of flight crews don't pay attention to some of the emails that we send out. So if you were to tap more in the lower right-hand corner, and right in the middle of my list, yours may be in a slightly different order, is the option that says custom content. When we tap on that, this is where PlotNG stores these trip kits. Okay. Now, you can see the date that they're added, so you can see which one comes first or which one comes last. Tapping on this will bring up all of the information that's actually in the trip kit. You'll notice on the third item down on the top, the organization is PlotNG. That just confirms for you that you're looking at our stuff. Okay. At the very bottom of that page, it says delete content pack. And that's how you remove it from 4Flight and get rid of it out of the system. So let me do this. And let me show you something very interesting that happens. So now the custom content pack's not there. When I bring the menu out, you can see it's removed from the available content packs. If I go to the map screen, well, this time it actually cleaned it out. I will tell you that there is a bug in 4Flight that they have not corrected in almost a year. If it turns out that you either see something on the screen or you see layers appearing in the menu item that shouldn't be there, the remedy for that is quit out of 4Flight entirely and just restart it. That will reset all the menus in 4Flight. That's the trick.
Okay. So deleting custom content from the more menu, the hamburger in the lower right, will get rid of all of the tracks and the ETPs and everything.
It gets rid of the custom content. It does not get rid of your marked positions. That's a different animal.
Yeah. If I delete it from flights, so it erases everything off of the map screen. If I delete it from flights, is it still stored in the custom content or not?
No.
Okay.
Custom content is just the graphics that we load on the screen.
Okay.
The second thing that you want to concern yourself with are the track logs, which I'm bringing up here. So if I show you the track logs, here is the current one from, that's the second one we just did. Here's the first one that we did from today with the marked position. What we always recommend is before deleting a track log, look in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, the square box with the up arrow. Save it somewhere. And we recommend saving the KML. Now, you can, if we touch other, you can potentially email it someplace or store it in a offline storage system, whatever you want to do. That data has every single point of where you've been on your trip, and it has the marked positions to prove where you were when you did your 10-minute chat. So we always recommend saving this thing as a KML, get it off the iPad. Then once it's off the iPad, if you want to delete it off your iPad, have at it, your business.
Okay. Yeah, I just wasn't sure if it was going to, what it was going to delete when I deleted from flights to clean up my long list.
Well, what flights is going to delete are these. It's going to delete two things. Firstly, we have whatever we've aggregated in the files, which you actually have in other locations, but this is where you aggregated it. But here's the second thing. At the very bottom of this list, you see right above the green pack icon, there is an item that says marked positions 1.
Oh yeah, okay.
Do you see? Okay, so that line item will only appear if there are marked positions on your screen. So when I tap this, here's the marked position that I entered. And you can tap on that if you want to see any additional data. That's up to you.
Right.
But this is just the marked positions. The track log, pardon me, are the marked positions plus the actual track, which is why it's wickedly more valuable than this. But if you wanted to save just the marked positions, go to this area from your flight and then send to, save it as a KML, and put it someplace. So there are ways of getting multiple copies of the data in various ways, should you need it later on. I will also tell you that there's ways to automate this. This is not the conversation for that. The conversation would come after your second or your third trip, and we can teach you about automation. Why don't we include this in the user guide? It's a very advanced feature of using iOS and ForeFlight, and no two iPads are identical. So it's very difficult to document this stuff, but we can take you through a Zoom session and show you how to do that.
Okay, cool.
Any other questions?
I don't have any.
Okay, let me give you the last piece of information. You kind of touched this in the beginning. As you are well aware, PlotNG is a pay-as-you-go service, so there's no contracts, no agreements, no nothing. Come and go as you please. Use us, use AirLink, use whatever you like. Makes no difference. We just recommend that you use something electronic to keep it quick, easy, and accurate. The way the business model works, just to refresh your memory, is we do not charge you per iPad, pilot, or aircraft. We only charge you to process the trip. So in your case, if you actually were flying with another crew member that did use an iPad and did use ForeFlight, only one pilot needs to request the trip kit. They can then forward the trip kit to the other pilot or airdrop it into their iPad. You only pay once for the trip. If you want to have multiple pilots submitting their request, we will gladly take your money, but you're throwing it out.
Yeah. Cool.
And of course, we have free unlimited phone, email, and Zoom support, and we do something that even Eric doesn't do. We answer the phone.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so let me thank you for your time. I'm delighted that we finally were able to hook up together.
Yes.
And let me reiterate that if you have other colleagues that would like to go through a demo, please don't hesitate to have them contact us. We're happy to talk about this as much as they need.
All right, I appreciate it.
Okay, good luck on your trip.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your patience in trying to get this together.
Not a problem. Have a great weekend.
You do the same.
Okay, bye now.
Bye.